I want to tell you about a Sunday dinner. The kind with a linen tablecloth, good china, the set I've had since 1987, pot roast in the oven, Gerald's favorite since he was 7 years old. Gerald, my son, 48 years old, successful, respected, the kind of man who gives a firm handshake and looks you straight in the eye. People trust men like Gerald immediately. I raised him to be that way. Turns out, I raised him a little too well. For 10 years, Gerald had been managing my properties, my rental homes, my land, the little office building on Whitaker Street I bought with 30 years of teacher's salary. I built that portfolio myself, property by property, dollar by dollar, and I handed it to my son because that's what you do. You trust your children. You sign the papers they put in front of you because they're your blood, because they look you in the eye, because the pot roast is in the oven and everything feels like it always has. Before I tell you what I found out, I want to know who is sitting with me right now. I'm Eleanor Marsh, Ellie to people I love, Savannah born and Savannah stubborn, and I am so glad you're here with me today. Drop your city in the comments right now. I want to see every single place this story reaches. And if someone sent this to you, tell me that too. It means somebody in your life thought you needed to hear this. Now, let me tell you about the for sale sign, the one Arthur, my neighbor of 31 years, knocked on my door to tell me about, on a property I never agreed to sell, with my signature on the listing agreement, a signature I did not remember writing. I went inside, made myself a cup of tea, sat at my kitchen table, and I started to think. I am 74 years old, and I have never once, not once, made a move before I was completely ready. Gerald should have remembered that.
I want to tell you who I was before Gerald, before any of this, because you need to understand what I built and why it mattered. My late husband, Thomas, passed in 1999. Heart attack, a Tuesday morning in April. He was 51 years old. We had $40 in a joint savings account and a mortgage with 11 years left on it. That was everything. I was a schoolteacher, 5th grade, 31 years at Gadsden Elementary. I didn't inherit anything. I didn't marry into anything. I just worked and saved and bought my first rental property at 53 years old, a little 2-bedroom on Huntington Street. I painted it myself over a long weekend, found tenants the following Monday. By the time I retired, I had 7 properties. 7. A rental portfolio that generated enough income for me to live comfortably and never ask my children for a single thing. That was the point, to never be a burden, to never be dependent. Gerald started helping me manage things about 10 years ago. It made sense at the time. I was 64. The paperwork was getting complicated. Tax filings, lease renewals, maintenance coordination. Gerald is good with numbers, good with people, good with paperwork. He sat across from me at this very kitchen table and said, "Mama, let me take some of this off your plate. That's what I'm here for." And I believed him. Why wouldn't I? He was my son. After Arthur came to my door about that for sale sign, I went to my filing cabinet. I keep everything. Thomas taught me that. Ellie, paper is the only thing that doesn't lie. I pulled every document Gerald had ever placed in front of me, and I sat at this table for 4 hours, reading, really reading, for the first time. The deed on the Huntington Street property, not my name. Gerald Allen Marsh. The Whitaker Street building, Gerald Allen Marsh. The 3 properties on the east side, Gerald, Gerald, Gerald. I closed the folder, folded my hands on top of it, and sat very still for a long time. Outside the window, the azaleas were blooming. Savannah in spring. Thomas always loved this time of year. I thought about calling Gerald immediately. Then I thought better of it. I needed to know everything first, every single thing, before I made a single move.
I did not call Gerald. Not that night, not the next morning. I made my tea, fed Arthur's cat, he leaves her with me when he travels, watered my plants, everything exactly as it always was. Because if Gerald was watching, and I had a feeling Gerald was always watching, I needed him to see nothing. An old woman going about her day. Nothing more. That is the gift of being underestimated. People show you exactly who they are when they think you aren't paying attention. I called Diana Cole on a Wednesday morning. Diana had been 2 years behind me in Sunday school, sharp as a tack her whole life, now one of the finest property attorneys in Savannah. I didn't tell her everything on the phone. I just said, "Diana, I need you to look at some documents, and I need you to tell me what I'm looking at, quietly." She heard something in my voice. "I'll clear my afternoon," she said. I drove to her office with my folder, sat across from her desk, watched her face as she read. Diana Cole has one of those faces that doesn't move much, courtroom trained. But about 12 pages in, her jaw tightened, just slightly. "Ellie," she set the papers down, "do you know how long this has been going on?" "I'm still counting," I said. She looked at me for a long moment. "All 7 properties have been transferred?" "I know." "Using your signature?" "I know that too." "Did you sign these documents knowingly?" I thought about all those Sunday dinners, all those papers slid across the table between the bread basket and the butter dish, Gerald explaining things in that patient tone he used with me, the one that always made me feel slightly foolish for not understanding faster. "No," I said, "I did not." Diana closed the folder, leaned back. "Then we have a great deal of work to do." "There's one more thing," I said. "What's that?" "My daughter, Suzanne." Diana looked up. "I haven't spoken to Suzanne in 20 years, but I think it's time I called her. She left Savannah for a reason, and I think that reason has Gerald's name on it." Suzanne picked up on the second ring. I hadn't heard her voice in 20 years. She sounded like herself, older, steadier. "Mama," just that word, and 20 years folded in half. "Suzanne, I need to ask you something." "I know why you're calling," she said. I sat very still. "You know?" "I've been waiting for this call for 15 years, Mama." Here is what Suzanne told me. 15 years ago, 5 years into Gerald's property management arrangement, Suzanne had come to visit. She'd gone through some of my mail while I was at the doctor. Not snooping, she was looking for a birthday card she'd sent that I mentioned hadn't arrived. What she found instead was a property transfer document with my signature on a property Suzanne knew I would never have willingly transferred. She confronted Gerald. He told me I was misreading it, that it was a tax strategy, that I didn't understand how these things worked. And when I said I was going to show you, he told me if I did, he'd tell you something about me, something from years ago, something I was ashamed of. Gerald had used his own sister's secret against her, kept her quiet for 15 years, while he kept taking. Suzanne was crying by this point. I was not. I had gone somewhere past crying. "Why didn't you come to me anyway?" I asked. "Because I was scared, Mama, and because
She stopped. Because what, baby? Because you always believed Gerald. You always have. I didn't think you'd believe me over him. She wasn't wrong. I had always believed Gerald. That was the whole machinery of it. My trust. My blind, faithful mother's trust. That was the tool he used. Suzanne, I said, I need you to come home. Silence. Home? To Savannah. I need you here. Mama, are you sure? I've never been more sure of anything in my life. And bring whatever you have, every document, every note, everything. Gerald made a mistake, sweetheart. I know exactly how to wait. Suzanne arrived on a Friday evening. I made her favorite, chicken and dumplings. We sat at this kitchen table, the same table where Gerald had slid all those papers in front of me, and we talked until 2 in the morning. She brought a box. Inside it, photographs of documents, notes she had made, dates, property numbers, things she had quietly documented over 15 years, just in case. She is my daughter, after all. Diana reviewed everything Suzanne brought. Combined with what I had already given her, we now had a complete picture. Gerald had transferred all 7 properties over a 9-year period, using a combination of forged signatures and documents slipped into stacks of legitimate paperwork. Routine things, lease renewals, insurance updates, annual tax filings. He knew I trusted him. He knew I didn't read every page. He knew the pot roast was in the oven and I was tired. Here is what Gerald did not know. He did not know about Arthur. Arthur, my quiet, careful neighbor of 31 years, who had been writing down every vehicle that visited my properties for the past 2 years. Dates, times, license plates. Arthur had noticed things changing. Couldn't say what exactly, but something in him said, write it down. That notebook was worth its weight in gold. Diana laid it out clearly. We had enough for full legal action, criminal charges potentially, civil recovery certainly. But I didn't want a courtroom. I didn't want Gerald's name in the Savannah Morning News, not because I wanted to protect him, but because a courtroom would take years, and I am 74 years old. I don't have years to spend watching lawyers talk. I had a different idea, one that would be faster and considerably more permanent. I invited Gerald to Sunday dinner. The following week. Pot roast, good china, the whole thing. He accepted immediately. Of course he did. He had no idea anything had changed. As far as Gerald knew, I was still the trusting old woman at the kitchen table, still signing whatever he put in front of me. Suzanne asked me that night, Mama, are you nervous? I thought about it genuinely. No, baby, I said. I've been serving that man's Sunday dinner his entire life. I know exactly how this table works. Sunday morning. I was up at 6, the way I've been up at 6 every Sunday for 50 years. Old habits are a kind of armor. I made coffee, strong, the way Thomas liked it, and I never stopped making it. I stood at my kitchen window looking out at the garden, the azaleas, the old oak in the back corner that Thomas planted the year Gerald was born. 48 years that tree had been growing. I thought about what I was about to do. Not with anxiety, with clarity. Diana had given me specific instructions. The folder, the real folder, the complete one, was to stay in my bedroom until the right moment. Not on the table, not visible. Gerald needed to sit down first, needed to feel comfortable, needed to be exactly where he always was at this table, in control. Let him have that feeling for one last Sunday. Suzanne came downstairs at 8:30. She looked like she hadn't slept. Mama, are you sure we shouldn't just let Diana? Suzanne. She stopped. I need to look my son in the eye when he understands what has happened, I said. I need him to see my face, not Diana's." She was quiet for a moment. Then she nodded. She understood. Gerald and Patrice arrived at 1 o'clock sharp. Gerald with a bottle of wine he always brings, Patrice in that particular smile she wears, the one that never quite reaches her eyes. Gerald walked in and hugged me, the way he always does, broad, warm, his father's hug. I hugged him back, held on just a moment longer than usual, because whatever he was, whatever he had done, he was still the 7-year-old who used to fall asleep in my lap during thunderstorms. That part was real. The rest of it was a choice he made. We sat down. Gerald poured the wine. Patrice complimented the centerpiece. And then Gerald looked across the table at Suzanne, who he had not seen in 20 years, and something moved behind his eyes, just quickly. Fear. I saw it, just 1 second. I taught school for 31 years. I know what guilty looks like.
We ate. Pot roast, roasted potatoes, green beans from Arthur's garden next door. Gerald had 2 helpings. Of course he did. The man has always eaten well at this table. He talked about work, a new development project on the south side, permits moving slowly, the usual complaints. Patrice talked about their vacation plans, Portugal in the fall. I listened, nodded at the right moments, asked the right questions, all the while watching Gerald's eyes drift, just occasionally, to Suzanne, trying to read her, trying to figure out what she had told me. Suzanne was extraordinary. She sat across from the brother who had blackmailed her into silence for 15 years, and she passed the bread rolls and asked about his children's soccer season. I had never been more proud of her. Dessert plates cleared, coffee poured. Gerald leaned back in his chair with that particular satisfaction he always carries after a good meal. Comfortable, settled, the king of the table he had been sitting at his whole life. "Mama," he said, "I actually have some paperwork for you to look at before we head out. Nothing major, just some updated insurance documentation on the Whitaker building." He reached into the bag he'd brought, pulled out a folder, slid it across the table toward me. Bread basket to the left, coffee cup to the right, papers in the middle. Mama signs. I looked at the folder, did not touch it. Then I looked up at Gerald. "Actually," I said calmly, "I have some paperwork too." He smiled, easy, indulgent. "Oh?" I stood up from the table, walked to my bedroom, came back with my folder, the real one, Diana's folder. I set it on the table, directly on top of his, and I sat back down. And I folded my hands, and I looked at my son. "Gerald," I said, "I'd like to talk about the properties." Patrice went very still, and Gerald's comfortable, well-fed Sunday afternoon smile began very slowly to come apart. Gerald laughed. That was his first move. A short, easy laugh, the kind designed to make the other person feel they've misunderstood something. "Mama, what about the properties? Everything's being managed just fine." "Open the folder, Gerald." He looked at me, then at Suzanne, then back at me, something recalculating behind his eyes. He looked at the first page, the second. His jaw tightened. "Where did you get these?" "They're my documents, Gerald, from my filing cabinet in my house. These are out of context. Is your name on the deed to the Huntington Street property?" Silence. "Gerald, yes or no?" "Mama, this was a tax strategy. I explained this. Is your name on the deed?" "Yes, but is your name on the deed to the Whitaker Street building?" He closed his mouth. Patrice put her hand on Gerald's arm, a practiced move. "Eleanor," her voice was smooth, measured, "I think there's been a misunderstanding about how these arrangements work. Gerald has been protecting your assets." "Patrice," I turned to her gently, "I taught 5th grade for 31 years. I know exactly when someone is explaining to me that isn't true." Gerald tried again. "Mama, I was going to tell you.
When? Suzanne said. Her voice was quiet, but it cut. Gerald looked at his sister. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. 20 years of silence between them sitting right there at the table. You told her, his voice low, tight. She already knew, Suzanne said. She figured it out herself. Something shifted in his face. The performance, the explaining, the smoothing, the managing, all of it dropped. What was left underneath was something I had never seen on my son's face before. Something naked and ashamed. Mama, his voice broke slightly. I was going to make it right. I always planned to. Don't, I said. One word. He stopped. I picked up his folder, the insurance papers he'd brought for me to sign. I held them for a moment. Then I set them back down in front of him. I won't be signing anything today. Or ever again. I'll get the dessert. Some things don't need to be shouted. They just need to be said. And then the sweet potato pie needs to come out before it gets cold.
Gerald and Patrice left 40 minutes later. Not dramatically. No shouting, no slam doors. Just two people who came to a Sunday dinner expecting one thing and left understanding that something had fundamentally changed. Gerald hugged me at the door. I let him. He held on longer than usual. Mama, I'm sorry. Barely a whisper against my shoulder. I patted his back, the way I have since he was small. I know you are, Gerald. I watched his car until it turned the corner. Then I closed the door, turned around. Suzanne was standing in the hallway. What happens now? She asked. I smiled at her for the first time in what felt like weeks. Now, I said, Diana goes to work. Diana filed the legal documentation on Monday morning. Formal notice of fraudulent property transfer. All 7 properties, 9 years of transactions, every forged signature documented, every date recorded, Arthur's notebook included as supporting evidence. Gerald received the notice Tuesday afternoon. He called me 4 times that evening. I did not answer. There was nothing left to say at this point. Everything had been said at the dinner table. Everything else was paperwork. And paperwork, as Gerald had always told me, was best handled by professionals. Wednesday morning, I woke up at 6, made my coffee, strong, the way Thomas liked it, sat at the kitchen table, and I made a list. Not a legal list, not a document, just a list. Things I had always wanted to do. Travel. I had never been to Ireland. Thomas's family came from County Clare. The little cottage on Tybee Island I had always said I would rent for a month someday. A proper garden, not just azaleas. Roses, the old climbing kind that Thomas always said needed too much attention. Maybe things that need attention are worth the trouble. Suzanne came downstairs and looked at my list over my shoulder. She didn't say anything for a moment. Then she sat down across from me. Can I add something? She asked. I slid the list toward her. She picked up the pen, wrote 2 words. Stay here. My daughter was coming home, and somewhere in the wreckage of what Gerald had done, something had been given back to me that I hadn't even known I was missing. Let me tell you what Gerald found out 3 weeks later. This is my favorite part. With Diana's work, all 7 properties were legally restored to my name within 30 days. Fraudulent transfers, documented, reversed. Gerald did not contest it. I think part of him was relieved, actually. The weight of carrying something like that, it changes a person. Not always in the ways you'd hope, but it changes them. What Gerald did not know, what nobody knew except Diana and Suzanne and Arthur, was what I had done 2 weeks before that Sunday dinner. Quietly, without announcement, I had sold the Whitaker Street building. The little office building on Whitaker Street that I bought with 30 years of teacher's salary. Not to just anyone, to a young woman named Carla Dennis, who'd been trying to purchase that building for 2 years to open a community health clinic. I sold it to her for exactly what she could afford,
which was considerably less than market value, and I donated the remainder, the difference between what she paid and what it was worth, to the Savannah Teachers' Pension Fund, in Thomas's name. Gerald found out on a Thursday morning when he went to check on the building, found Carla's crew painting the exterior, called me immediately. "Mama, the Whitaker building is no longer yours to manage," I said pleasantly, "so it's no longer yours either." "I don't understand." "I know you don't, sweetheart." Gerald and I are speaking again, slowly, carefully, the way you rebuild something that was damaged by someone you still love. Patrice left him 6 months later. Different story for a different day. Suzanne is living in the guest room she grew up in. We have dinner together 3 times a week. Arthur joined us last Tuesday, brought his famous cornbread. And me? I booked Ireland for the spring. County Clare, 7 days. Thomas would have loved every minute of it. And now I want to hear from you. You have sat with me through every piece of this, the paperwork, the Sunday dinners, the quiet decisions made at this kitchen table. Tell me, what hit you hardest? Was it the folder? The Whitaker Street building? Suzanne coming home? Drop it in the comments. I read every single one. And where are you watching from today? Drop your city. Let's see how far this table reaches. If this story meant something to you, share it with one person who needs it, right now. Because somewhere out there is a woman sitting at a kitchen table wondering if she still has any moves left. She does. She always did. She just needed to remember that being quiet is not the same as being finished. I'm Eleanor Marsh, and I am very much still here.